Welcome back, everybody. We are Cyber News Global. I'm Tommy McCarthy, and this is Let's Talk Cyber. And I'm delighted to welcome along Stuart Anderson. He's the founder of Xpert DPO. Quite an interesting subject today. We're going to talk about the failure of appropriate technical and organisational measures. Oh, what a minefield. But before we do, let's hear from Stuart himself. Stuart, welcome. How are you, sir?
Hi, Tommy. It's great to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me. Little bit about myself. I'm an information security expert with over 20 years experience in the information security industry. Today, I'm the founder and CEO of Xpert DPO. We started out in 2018 as purely a data protection consultancy, but we've evolved. And today we're one of the leading providers of information governance and security services, not just in the UK and Ireland, but we're also reaching out into GCC regions. We've got clients on every in every area of the world, on every continent at this stage. So the main bit about what we do, we provide information security services to a large number of government and enterprise clients across the globe. More recently, we have opened a small office in Bahrain, which serves as our base to service our growing client base in the GCC region.
Wonderful, wonderful, Stuart. Well, Bahrain, hopefully we'll see you there this year, but let's get to Dubai first. Technical and organisational measures, or as you've kindly abbreviated it to TOMS. Are they just a GDPR thing? Is that right? Is it just a GDPR thing, TOMS?
No. So again, TOMS, we got GDPR in 2018, and technical and organisational measures in the industry, we call them TOMS. It does relate directly back to the GDPR. However, within the GCC region, we're seeing a lot of new laws that are being updated or introduced that come on the back of GDPR being implemented in 2018. So, for example, you just mentioned Bahrain. It'll be great to see you there, Tommy.
Yes.
We've got the Bahrain PDPL, which is Law 30 of 2018. And that states explicitly that data controllers must ensure the safety of data by applying adequate levels of security and technical measures to protect the data. So it's there in black and white. Bahrain, TOMS. Saudi Arabia, PDPL, updated and amended as recently as 2023, in particular relation to transfers of data, states that data controllers must take the necessary organizational, administrative, and technical measures to ensure the security of personal data. So that right off the bat, in GCC, we've got two. If you go to the UAE, which is relevant for GISEC, Dubai International Financial Centre has its own data protection law. It states controllers must implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data against data loss or unauthorized access, and must only engage data processors providing sufficient guarantees in respect of technical security and organizational measures.
Stuart, my head's exploding. My Lord, how on earth do you keep up with all that? And more importantly, I guess one of the things is, can we fulfill the regulatory requirements by implementing just technical measures? So from my point of view, are we satisfying the regulators if all we do is implement just technical measures or solutions?
As a services guy, I've got to say no to that.
Okay.
So there are two sets of requirements. We've got the technical requirements, and under GDPR, I mean, a lot of the GDPR is written from the perspective that it leaves a lot of grey areas. So we talk about processing. If you're doing anything with data, personal data under the GDPR, it can be considered as processing. Even destructing data is considered as processing. So we don't have a list. We don't have a list of items of personal data. We just have this somewhat esoteric paragraph that says, if either on its own or with other bits of information, it can be used to identify someone, it can be classed as personal data. And it's the same. We have anonymization and pseudonymization explicitly called out in the GDPR as just two of the technical measures. There are lots of other technical measures. Cybersecurity comes into this, but cybersecurity is massive. And I'm not going to get into that now. But things like, have you got antivirus?
Yeah.
Have you got multi-factor? Do you have firewalls? Do you patch? I mean, the biggest thing we come across, Tommy, is organizations not patching machines, not patching operating systems. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you're not doing that, and again, we've reported both to ICO and the Data Protection Commissioner in Ireland breaches on behalf of clients, and they've come back a lot of times saying, can you tell us what your TOMS are? Give us an idea of what you're doing. Do you patch? Okay, so if
Yes,
you
for
don't
sure.
patch, you're immediately on the back foot. So all of that stuff, I would say, is technical. But in terms of organizational measures, that's where we work a lot with our clients and Xpert DPO. I'm going to give you an analogy.
Good.
You can spend millions of dollars on the latest security system. So let's take a CCTV system, for example. Okay, and you've spent millions of dollars on this. It's the most high-tech camera system that you can buy, and you've installed it into your building, okay? But then your staff leave the doors wide open, they leave windows open, and they go home. So you've got the most expensive camera system, technical, okay? You've got a technological approach, it's the best that money can buy, but the human factor has let you down because they've left doors unlocked and they've left windows open. Okay, so there's a lack of understanding around the importance of governance. So you have a technical piece, but you've got to have the governance piece that sits alongside that gives you your, we call them house rules, but that's your policy environment. So what's the policy environment around the camera? What's the policy environment around physical security? Because they go together. So you've got a technical solution, but if your staff don't know how to report a breach or how to report a window that's being left open constantly or somebody's not locking the door, there's no policy covering that, there's no procedure covering that. So you might have a technical solution, but the organizational solution is missing. So you've got the T, but no OMS.
So quite a bit of a minefield, Stuart. You touched on something there right at the opening of the response to this one. You talked about the ambiguity of the GDPR, the regulation. You're absolutely right. People interpret GDPR from quite a few different perspectives, because it is very ambiguous and still is very ambiguous. I guess if I was a business owner looking at this from a greenfield or greenfield perspective, where can I start? How do I approach this whole TOMS piece as an organisation that's had nothing in place, not put anything in place? How on earth do I start to approach this?
So my answer to that, any organisation, whether they're in GCC, UAE, Europe, security always begins with governance. The majority of security issues that we've seen as an organisation stem from governance or lack thereof.
Yeah.
So you need to, we as consultants, we take a lot of time understanding the organisation that we're going to be working with. We take a lot of time to understand their strategy. What are the plans for growth? Now, lots of organisations don't have that plan, so you've got to work with what you have. It all generally starts off, Tommy, with trying to get organisations, and you'd be surprised how many organisations don't do this, but we try and get an understanding within that organisation that data, not just personal data, is an asset. Anybody doesn't think of the data that they have within their organisation as an asset, they're not going to protect it. You protect your assets, you protect what you've invested in, okay? So the first step, you've got to understand what data you're processing, okay? If, for example, you don't have an idea of what information is flowing through your organization, there is absolutely no point going out spending millions of dollars on data loss prevention tools, because data loss prevention cannot work without classification. If you don't know what data you have, you can't classify it. So this is how we approach these. So you've got to know what you have, you've got to classify it. And if you've not classified it and you don't know what you have, how do you know the risk? How do you know in terms of risk
and
what
I
you
guess,
have?
Stuart, you've triggered a light bulb moment there. I don't know if you saw it. It did come on and go off very quickly because you talked about data classification. But if you don't know where your data is, if you haven't mapped your data, how on earth can you classify it? So
Exactly.
it's pretty evident to me that, you know, a lot of people looked at the implementation of GDPR and the whole data, the data protection regulation as just another set of rules. There's not much to look at. But when you get into the nitty gritty, my goodness.
Yeah.
You know,
the data mapping is really important. And again, some of those updated regulations, again, in terms of Abu Dhabi Global Markets, they actually say you have to keep a record of processing. And the record of processing must, in a general manner, detail how you're approaching technical and organizational measures.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Stuart, because we're going to be pushing this podcast series out quite heavily at GISEC. That's the purpose of this recording. I'm going to ask you for one call to action for the 20,000 plus people that will be visiting GISEC over those 3 days, reading your article, coming along and speaking to you at the UK Pavilion. What's your one call to action for those people that don't have time to come and see you in relation to this whole project?
Yeah, so you've got to start somewhere. So treat it as a greenfield. Understand that you have data. Understand that it is the lifeblood of your organization. Understand if you lose access to it, whether that's a database that just goes down because the system isn't patched or you've suffered a ransomware attack, understand that you've got to be able to be in a position where you know what you have, you know what you're potentially going to lose, and put some value on it. And understand that without data, and I'm not going to say data is the new oil because I don't necessarily align to that, but it should be treated as an asset. Start out by understanding what data you have, understand the risks. I mean, if it's high risk processing like banking details or health data, we have a lot of clients in the banking and health space. They recognize and realize the importance of protecting that data because without it, they've no business.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess there's a few, well, whilst I ask you for a call to action, there's a few points there that clearly people need to consider. It's not just an exceptional subject like TOMS. There's a lot of things that rely on each other to be in place to ensure that you're doing your best to safeguard people's data. Well,
Absolutely.
Stuart, I think this is a conversation for people to have with Xpert DPO. It's not something that you can read about and just go away and implement it yourself. There's no doubt from my point of view, over the 3 days of GISEC, Xpert DPO are going to be very busy. So I can't begin to thank you enough because it's a subject that can become a bit of a minefield, for want of a better word. You know, organizational and technical measures, challenges a lot of people, and a lot of DPOs that claim to be experts.
Yeah.
Don't even know.
And the key there is that it's appropriate to the risk.
Yeah.
So we would never go into an organization that they might process data and a lot of it, but it may not be a large amount of special category data, or it might not be, important from an IP perspective, but they just process data. So we wouldn't go into that client and, do a whole 9 yards thing on it. It has to be appropriate to the risk associated with that data and appropriate to the organization. So, smaller organizations don't have the resources to spend millions on this stuff. So you'd never go in and, what we're really talking about is building out an achievable framework that matures over time as the organization grows. And that's really the only way to do it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone could just hit the ground running here when they're looking at the minefield of data protection, especially around TOMS. Well, Stuart, unfortunately, we've run out of time. All that leaves me to do is say thank you very much for joining us, for joining Let's Talk Cyber. You're going to be at the UK Pavilion in Hall 4, J1, the Pavilion. You're going to be there for 3 days. There'll be plenty of contact information available for Stuart. If you like what you've heard today, our listeners, please remember, press that subscribe button. Stuart's contact details will be available. Stuart Anderson, Xpert DPO founder, thank you very much for your time.